Darkness belongs behind closed doors, yet here you are. I am Morgan Nightfall, and this is Nightfall Archives. Tonight, we unravel a case so perplexing that even those who investigated it were left questioning reality itself. It was the night of October 12th, 2019. A quiet autumn evening in the small town of Ravenbrook, Massachusetts. The kind of town where everyone knew everyone, and nothing ever happened. But that night, something did. A man named Daniel Whitmore walked into his third-floor apartment at exactly 10:03 p.m. Security cameras confirmed it. He was alone. No one followed him in. No one was waiting inside. And yet, by morning, Daniel Whitmore was gone. The next morning, Daniel's boss grew concerned when he didn't show up for work. Multiple calls went unanswered. By noon, his sister, Claire Whitmore, drove to his apartment. She knocked. No answer. She called his phone. It rang from inside the apartment. But Daniel didn't pick up. Growing uneasy, Claire contacted the building manager, Harold Kemp, who unlocked the door. What they found inside defied all logic. Daniel's keys, phone, and wallet were all sitting on the kitchen counter. His coat was still draped over the chair as if he had just walked in. His TV was on, frozen on a static screen. A half-empty glass of water sat on his bedside table. No signs of struggle, no forced entry. But Daniel, nowhere. The front door was still locked from the inside. The windows remained shut, latched, 3 floors above the street. There was only one way in and one way out, and yet, Daniel Whitmore was gone. As Claire walked through the apartment trying to make sense of the scene, something caught her eye. A single piece of paper placed neatly on the dining table. One sentence, handwritten in red ink. "Don't look for me." Claire Whitmore stood frozen. Her hands trembled as she picked up the note. The handwriting, it was Daniel's. "Don't look for me," but that didn't make sense. Daniel wasn't the type to run. He had a stable job, no known enemies, and no history of mental illness. And yet, he had vanished without a trace. Detective Samuel Grayson was the first on the scene. A seasoned officer with 20 years in law enforcement, but nothing in his career had prepared him for this. No signs of forced entry, no disturbances, no evidence of struggle. It was as if Daniel had simply ceased to exist. The building had one security camera in the hallway. At 10:03 p.m., the footage showed Daniel entering his apartment. He closed the door, and that was the last time anyone saw him. The door never opened again. No one entered, no one left. For the next 9 hours, the hallway remained empty. Until Claire arrived the next morning, Daniel had disappeared without ever stepping outside. Claire sat in the kitchen, trying to stay calm as Detective Grayson examined the note. That's when the officer turned toward the fridge and stopped. Something had been scratched into the metal door. The letters were uneven, jagged, as if they had been carved in a hurry. 3 words, "Help me, underneath." Grayson knelt down. He ran his hand along the tile floor. It felt solid. But then, he noticed something. A hairline crack along the kitchen tiles. A perfectly square outline. Grayson and his team pried the tiles open, revealing a hidden crawl space beneath the apartment floor. The opening was no wider than a coffin. Dust and darkness swallowed whatever lay beyond. A foul, musty air escaped from the hole, the stench of something old, something rotten. Grayson shined his flashlight inside. The beam disappeared into darkness. Then, something moved. A single fingerprint pressed into the dust below, fresh, recent. And then, the sound. A faint, rasping breath coming from the void below. Grayson turned to Claire. "Stay here," he said. He lowered himself into the opening, gun drawn. The crawl space was tight, the air thick. The deeper he moved, the stronger the smell became, like rotting wood and old sweat. Then, his flashlight landed on something impossible. A tattered, mold-covered mattress, a rusty metal chain bolted to the wall, and a single blood-stained shoe. Size 11. Daniel Whitmore's size. Pinned to the wall with a rusted nail, a second note awaited. This one was written in black ink, the letters smudged with what looked like sweat. Or blood. "They found me. I didn't run. They took me underneath." Grayson turned back toward the entrance, his pulse pounding. "Claire, call for backup. Now." And then he heard it. A sound from deeper in the tunnel. Not a voice. Not a breath. Something moving. Police sealed off the apartment. Forensics teams were brought in. They found no fingerprints in the crawl space, no footprints, no human DNA. But there was one last thing to check. Grayson ordered a forensic review of Daniel's phone. It had stopped receiving messages at 11:42 p.m. the night he vanished. But at 11:39 p.m. it had recorded something. A 1-minute voice memo. Shaky breathing, the sound of fingernails scraping against wood. And then, a whisper. Daniel's voice, terrified. "Please, if anyone hears this, they're inside the walls." Then silence. Daniel Whitmore was never found. His bank accounts remained untouched. His car sat in the same parking spot for months. His family held a memorial, but there was no body to bury. The apartment was cleaned out and re-rented, but something wasn't right. The next tenant moved in 6 months later. Within 3 weeks, he filed a noise complaint, scratching. In the walls, and once again. By morning, the apartment was empty. Once you step through the doors of darkness, you can never go back. But tell me, if you heard scratching in the wall, would you stay?